Friends, please join me in welcoming Sheriff David Clarke, our next guest on the John Fredericks Show. Sheriff Clarke began his career at the Milwaukee Police Department in 1978, where he served for 24 years in numerous capacities. Of his many roles at MPD, he was commanding officer of the Intelligence Division, which produced and shared intelligence for dignitary protection with federal agencies. He is a senior advisor to America First Action, with whom I have the pleasure of working with over at America First. Sheriff Clarke has retired his law enforcement career. The sheriff has a knack for social media activism and can send out his message to his Twitter followers of nearly 1 million to be heard. He is no stranger to political commentary and has been a guest on CBS Evening News, CNN, and the list is long of all the Fox shows, and it is my pleasure and honor to welcome Sheriff Clarke. Welcome, Sheriff.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Thank you. You know, I'm so happy to have you on the show for a number of reasons. One is I wanted to talk to you a little bit about deploying the National Guard to defend the border with Mexico. I had the opportunity to do a tour of the border with Mexico from New Mexico and El Paso. And I had never been before, Sheriff. And when I went and I did the tour, I was amazed at how there were entire areas that really there's no protection there at all. And you know, I'm amazed that our president, who's finally making, we finally have a president that is fighting for the people, making America first, defending our border, is actually receiving criticism over deploying the National Guard.
You know, it's really something. Let's kind of sort that out a little bit. You're right about the border. Our border is porous. That's pretty evident when you hear stories of illegal aliens that cross into the country. They're deported. They come back over and over and over again. We've heard stories of people who've been deported 30 and 40 times only to return. That tells me that our border is not sealed. Obviously, and you've been there, the border is not some linear flat land area that can be easily monitored. And the United States is a sovereign nation. If you're going to be a sovereign nation, then you have to have borders and you have to protect those borders. I think some of the illegal crossings into the United States is a gross violation of U.S. sovereignty. No other country in the world would tolerate it. Try crossing into Iran illegally and see what happens. And then also, some of our policies, they don't help us either. And it's why I'm glad to see that we finally have a commander-in-chief in President Donald Trump, who means what he says and says what he means. He's talked about it during the campaign. He said he was going to fix our broken immigration system. It's going to take some time because it is so badly broken. But he's showing through action that he's serious about it. Most presidents, his predecessors, have paid lip service to what's going on at the border. And also it's a gross violation of the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution when you hear states like California, like Oregon, like Washington State declare themselves to be sanctuary states. The Constitution is very clear that the federal law is the supreme law of the land, and no state law can override federal law. So when you look at some of this stuff, especially this, like I said, our policies like catch and release, where someone illegally crosses into the United States, we say, oh, hey, here's a note to appear in court to contest your illegal status here in the United States. Enjoy your stay, and we let them into the United States, never to be seen again. This stuff is crazy.
You're absolutely correct. And in fact, when I had done the border wall tour, there's a cattle crossing right there in New Mexico, and over 3,500 head of cattle in a stampede entered into the United States from Mexico. Of course, they passed through USDA and so forth, but the gate is a mesh gate that has to be opened, of course, to allow the cattle to enter. Anybody could sneak in through there. I mean, and of course, the sand, the way it blew, the way the wind blows, and it creates these sand ladders, if you will, or it creates tunnels underneath these fence-like walls. And being there with my own eyes and seeing it firsthand, I mean, I stood by it, building this wall and protecting our border long before, but seeing it and witnessing it without hesitation, without question, we have a president that is protecting our United States borders, and what a blessing that he is, there and speaking about deploying our National Guard. I supported 100% and was eager to hear your views as well. I'd like to transition now because you and I were both inducted into the Washington, D.C. National Area NRA at the same time. Was the year before last. And I wanted to get your take on the students that left school and came to march in Washington, and wanted to discuss with you what your thoughts were on the march and their message, and what ramifications, if any, do you see coming from these students leaving their homes, their schools, and coming to Washington, in terms of the damage that's going to do to our Second Amendment rights that are so dear to not only your heart and mind, but to millions and millions of Americans all across our great nation?
Sure. There's two aspects of this. First of all, these young people, they're misguided. Typical behavior of people who are inexperienced about life and about some of these very historical issues that we're talking about. When we talk about the United States Constitution, I bet they don't even teach the Constitution at many of these high schools that these young people come from. And then there's the other aspect of this. These young kids are being conscripted. They're being exploited by the anti-gun movement, who will stop at nothing to pursue this anti-gun, this gun confiscation movement. I'm glad to see that finally they've come out of the closet about what their true intentions are. And it's not about improving safety. It's not about reducing violence. It's about pure, unadulterated gun confiscation. And now that their motives are pure, I think most people will wake up, because there are a lot of people on the other side of the aisle, Democrats, who are gun owners. They're truly avid Second Amendment supporters, and they're going to see some of this as a bridge too far. I think that walk should have been named instead of, like I said, they're just out for a walk. Instead of calling it the March for Our Lives, it should have been called the March for Gun Confiscation. I don't think it's going to have any effect. I know there were some minor things some states did, including Florida. They're talking about strengthening background checks, stuff like that. But, that's not really at the heart of what's going on here with some of these mass shootings. It was a big swing and a miss. And, of course, when these things happen, these tragedies happen, the anti-gun ninnies and the anti-gun movement pulls out their gun control agenda, and they see what boxes they can check off. They start talking about things like universal background check, of which there is no such thing. They start talking about limiting the size of magazines in terms of how many bullets that they can hold. They talk about banning certain weapons. None of that had anything to do with any of these mass shootings. So, again, it's been politicized. They've been politicized. I think it's a shame. These young people do not realize that they're being exploited. But at some point, this thing will fizzle out. It's already starting to. I don't think you'll see any more major wearing away of our Second Amendment rights. Those things are near and dear, as you indicated, and we need to fight for those rights. So, in times like this, I hate to see people on our side, conservatives, probably, some GOP members, and when we talk about gun owners and the like, to get, sheepish and to try to and to sometimes get embarrassed, into doing things with the Second Amendment that we have no business doing. We have to stand strong. We have to stand on principle. We have to support that Constitution, and we have to support the people who, like our judiciary, who are responsible for making sure that the Constitution is carried out the way it was drawn up by the Founding Fathers.
Amen. I'm with you 100%. And, I'll tell you, one of the most profound interviews I saw, was a gentleman who was close to one of the recent shootings, and he said, "I wish I had a gun. If only I had had a gun on me, I could have helped save lives. I could have. There would be more. We would have had more. We would have had less loss of life." And listening to his words and seeing the tears roll down his cheeks, it just really touched my heart. And I was wondering if you had a message for the parents that, permitted their students to leave school, literally leave school, and come to Washington to march. If there's a message you could give the parents, the mothers and the fathers, that many of whom came with the students, but really, seem to be so misguided that they want to allow their children in these gun-free zones to be sitting there with a bullseye over these schools.
Yeah, my message to the parents would be to open your eyes, wake up, realize that your kids are being indoctrinated. They're not being educated in schools anymore. These are nothing more than laboratories of liberal indoctrination, preparing them to become liberals when they turn into adults. It's a parent's job to raise their kids. They send their kids to public schools using public funds for an education, not an indoctrination. And, many of these young people, like I said, they're just misguided. They're well-intentioned, but they're misguided. They don't have the experience in life, with life, that they do, that the parent does, that the adult does. Do not turn over the raising of your kids to a public school system that's no longer interested in educating kids, but indoctrinating them into liberal orthodoxy and liberal ideology. And, get involved with your school board, get involved with the school districts, the PTAs, and demand to know what's being taught inside these schools and to have more control. The parents need more control over the curriculum. Stop all this nonsense, this liberal ideology, and start educating kids again. But what too many parents do today at all levels, I'm talking about the high school, the middle school, and the grade school level, is they just turn their kid over to this public school system, this very left-leaning ideology, and they feel, that their job is done, that it's the school's job to educate the kid and the school's job to do some of these things. No, it's still your job. You still need to be involved. And, we've told the parents, or the school systems, I should say, have told the parents, hey, don't worry about it, we'll take it from here. No, that is a very dangerous thing to do. And I don't know how any parent could allow their kid to be politicized like that, especially after a tragedy.
That's absolutely right. Thank you. I hope your message is heard to those parents, all across our country, because it's an important message to be heard. Sheriff Clarke, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you and working with you more. Actually, we will be in Vegas. You will be you will be headlining Vegas with our vice president for a town hall coming up next week, right?
That's next week. I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to seeing you as well.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, sir. Have a great day.
You do the same. My pleasure.
Thank you.